about a man called Scaramanga.
The man with the golden gun. He always uses a golden bullet.
This trinket was sent with a note requesting special delivery to you.
I have never seen Mr. Scaramanga. Mr. Bond, this is impossible. I can't...
I can't tell you. You'll kill me.
Who?
Scaramanga.
Roger Moore, back in action in the exotic East as James Bond, 007, on a collision course with the most dangerous man alive. The man with the golden gun.
Despite initial worries about Sean Connery's departure and whether or not the new Bond would be up to the task, Live and Let Die proved to be another smash hit in the franchise. Roger Moore's take on James Bond, as well as the themes of black culture present at the time, gave the series the visual makeover it needed for contemporary audiences. Inspired by its success, producers Albert Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman commenced production of the next film almost immediately after Live and Let Die premiered. The film would come to bear a lot of similarities to its predecessor in terms of adopting cultural themes, current events, and film fads into its story. During this period, martial arts had experienced a boom in popularity, largely owing to the work and untimely death of famed martial artist Bruce Lee and his signature film Enter the Dragon. Due to this, the story of the film would also mostly take place in Thailand, bringing Bond back into an Asian setting for the first time since You Only Live Twice. Key plot points were also inspired by the 1973 energy crisis, which was still going on at the time of filming. All of these things and more came together in one very interesting mixed bag in 1974, known as The Man with the Golden Gun.
The target is the highest priced killer in the world. He plays a deadly game, and the stakes are sky high.
Even with Moore's recent introduction, The Man with the Golden Gun would come to be its own turning point in the franchise. Guy Hamilton would return for the fourth and final time as director, while Tom Mankiewicz returned for the third and final time as writer before being replaced by veteran writer Richard Maibaum. On top of all of this, The Man with the Golden Gun was the final Bond film that producer Harry Saltzman would be involved with, due to an increasing amount of debt that forced him to sell his 50% stake in the franchise rights to adapting the Fleming novels. This would leave Cubby to become the sole stakeholder and being shouldered with full responsibility for producing future Bond films going forward. The combination of so many of the same people involved with Live and Let Die should be seen as a good thing, or at least a sign of promise, as it would show a sign of cohesion and direction for the series. However, keep in mind, these are the same people who brought us the absolute dumpster fire that was Diamonds Are Forever, a film that almost thought having an American James Bond was a good idea. Thankfully, The Man with the Golden Gun doesn't quite sink to those depths of desperation, but it never really manages to progress beyond its rote conventions and puzzling narrative choices.
What you might call a Mexican screw-up, gentlemen.
To start, the opening scene is actually pretty decent because it once again saves Bond for after the credits sequence, opting to build anticipation for his mission by featuring the villain of the film, Francisco Scaramanga, who's played by one of the most iconic actors in all of British cinema, none other than Dracula himself, Christopher Lee. He takes some time to enjoy the sun while the camera shows us the fact that he has a third nipple for an uncomfortable period of time. One of the mobsters from Diamonds Are Forever shows up to try and kill him in a game of death where one must outdo the other, all while being watched by Scaramanga's dwarf manservant Knick-Knack, played by Hervé Villechaize. This scene is a lot of fun to watch. It's one of those classic cat and mouse scenarios, made more interesting with all the detailed scenery in the background. It's like a funhouse designed by some crazy architect. Of course, the guy ends up getting wasted by Scaramanga, and he gets the rest of his money back before the opening titles roll in.
This one was the best, n'est-ce pas?
Not bad. Not bad at all. But you'll have to do better than that if you want to come into my money.
I get you yet, and I'll enjoy every sou you leave me.
It'll be the death of me yet, Knick-Knack.
We then get introduced to the main theme of the film, performed by Scottish singer Lulu, and if I'm being brutally honest, it's the worst theme I've ever heard in the entire franchise. I mean, it's nails on chalkboard bad. I'm sure Lulu is a great singer in her other performances, but this is lousy. Her voice changes from clean to guttural without warning, the guitars play over the trombones, trumpets play over the guitars. It's a complete mess. It's like every musician and artist is fighting for who can make the most noise in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Apparently, John Barry only had 3 weeks to compose the entire soundtrack, which for a film like this is absolutely shameful. The music throughout the rest of the film is okay, but as far as main themes go, this is an all-time low. In fact, there's even an alternate theme performed by Alice Cooper. Man, why couldn't we get that one? Anyway, the rest of the story continues from here after the opening titles, where Bond is informed of his mission by MI6. A golden bullet is delivered to the organization with Bond's codename etched into the surface, and he's ordered to investigate a tip that may lead to its manufacture. It turns out that the bullet is manufactured by a gunsmith named Lazar in Macau, who sells them to one of Scaramanga's contacts, Andrea Anders, played by Swedish actress Maud Adams. This part of the film is great. It's classic spy detective work interjected with bits of humor characteristic of Moore's version of Bond. The best part is when Bond holds up Lazar with one of his own guns in the range. He manages to be both funny and threatening at the same time.
I'm now aiming precisely at your groin. Says speak or forever hold your peace.
The whole film is centered on finding Scaramanga and stopping his evil plot, so let's talk about him for a bit. He's a multi-millionaire hitman who accepts contracts throughout the world while charging $1 million per hit. His skill in the art of killing allows him to live a life of luxury, but he also uses this money to fund his own personal ambitions. He runs a solar power plant that comes equipped with deadly weaponry powered by a MacGuffin device known as the Solex Agitator. Once his operation at the plant is complete, he plans to sell his technology to the highest bidder, contributing further to the disruption of world peace. In this sense, the villain actually resembles Goldfinger in that both of them aren't exactly conquer-the-world type personalities as with other Bond films, but rather simply try to make as much money as possible by any means necessary. They even share similar affinities with gold, as Scaramanga wields a golden gun, the weapon that the film gets its name from, and he uses it in every assassination he takes part in. Unlike Goldfinger, however, Scaramanga is much more different in terms of personality. He doesn't see himself as being better than Bond, but instead as equals. This motivates him to hone his craft and prepare himself for what he sees as the battle of a lifetime, whereas Bond treats it like it's any other mission. He also stays 2 steps ahead of Bond every chance he gets, getting other people to do favors for him, informing contacts of his presence, and just really getting under Bond's skin. The dynamic between these characters is cemented in the dinner before their eventual duel, and it's one of the best scenes in the whole franchise. Scaramanga thoroughly deconstructs Bond as nothing more than a typical working man enslaved by the British government with a thirst for blood, and it's one of the few times I can think of where Moore's Bond loses his cool.
There's a useful 4-letter word, and you're full of it. When I kill, it's on the specific orders of my government, and those I kill are themselves killers.
Oh, come, Mr. Bond, you disappoint me. You get as much fulfillment out of killing as I do, so why didn't you admit it?
I admit killing you would be a pleasure.
Christopher Lee is simply phenomenal in this role. He's the most confident enemy Bond has encountered at this point in the series, towering over Bond both figuratively and literally. He's the classic example of a methodical assassin, kind of like Red Grant in From Russia with Love, but in complete control over his own domain. There's no one pulling his strings to fire the trigger. Whether he does it for money, to cover up his tracks, or just for the sheer sport of it all, he kills because he chooses to, and because he's good at it. And the best part about it is that his identity remains virtually anonymous and unknown to MI6, except for the whole third nipple thing. It makes you wonder who the source was on that one. He's not diabolical in a grandiose sort of way, but how he chooses to live his life on his own terms, even if they're morally questionable at best, still strikes a nerve in Bond's psyche. And the tricks he pulls on Bond at every corner just when he gets close to solving the mystery, only to fall back behind again, is brilliant. He's only one man, but Scaramanga operates with the strength and intelligence of an army, and knows exactly what buttons he can get away with pushing. He knows Bond inside and out because in his own words, they are one and the same. He's the shadow that follows Bond wherever he goes, who knows his darkest secrets and insecurities and uses them to his advantage. For this alone, Scaramanga stands out as the greatest villain in the Roger Moore era of films. Sorry to spoil it this early, but it doesn't get any better than this.
A duel between titans. My golden gun against your Walther PPK. Each of us with a 50-50 chance.
6 bullets to your 1.
I only need 1.
The other villain in this film, Knick-Knack, is also fantastic. He probably gets the award for being the most adorable henchman in the entire series. He's a Frenchman who typically works as Scaramanga's personal assistant at his private island, but he's also no stranger to getting involved in his dirty affairs as well. What I like most about Knick-Knack is that he holds both Bond and Scaramanga in equal contempt. He's definitely not a good guy by any means, but he's also an opportunist and will assist Bond however he can as long as it means he can inherit Scaramanga's fortune when he dies. You can tell Hervé had a ball with this performance. The way he plays tricks in the funhouse, taunts them from his chair, and just terrorizes everyone he encounters is hilarious. And he has really good taste in hot sauce, if I do say so myself. One could be forgiven for thinking he's being taken advantage of by the filmmakers due to his size and that he's just being played for laughs, but I can't help but love the little guy. I think it's because of his French accent.
Monsieur, good shooting.
I've never killed a midget before, but there can always be a first time.
Oh, monsieur.
I remember my friend and I saying this phrase every time we were confused with French lessons at school. Oh, monsieur. It's rare to see a villain take advantage of both heroes and villains to this degree, rather than just be a lapdog to whatever Bond's nemesis demands him to do. Knick-Knack may not be the most menacing henchman in the series, but he's so entertaining to watch, you almost believe he really could kill Bond.
Hey, let me! Ow! Ow! Hey! Hey, what are you doing? Ouch! Come on! I can't breathe! Ow! You'll be sorry! I may be small, but I never forget! Hey! Ow! I kill you if you don't let me out of there! Ow! Let me out, you big bully!
Shut up.
As far as the Bond girls go, it's both good and bad. Very, very bad. The good one is a bit ironic because she's actually associated with the villain Scaramanga. Maud Adams plays his mistress Andrea Anders and is regularly forced against her will to acquire the golden bullets he needs to complete his hits. Adams does a good job playing a conflicted woman who wants to help Bond succeed in his mission, but fears for what will happen to her if she does so, a fear that ends up being realized toward the end of the film. It's a great tragic narrative, and it may not be 100% original, but at least it's believable, and she even goes out of her way to warn Bond when Scaramanga is onto him. The lead Bond girl, however, is a totally different story. Bond gets assigned an assistant to help with his mission named Mary Goodnight, played by another Swedish actress, Britt Ekland. I appreciate the fact that the filmmakers gave her some background history between her and Bond to sort of mix things up a bit, but I just can't accept that she's supposed to be a Bond girl. She adds nothing to Bond's mission. All she does is throw a temper tantrum when Bond has to leave her to take part in his mission. She's so insecure that she gets jealous of 2 adolescent school children who happen to be in the same car as him. How immature can this character possibly get? Well, it turns out a lot more. Right before the famous dinner scene, Goodnight appears to greet Bond in a friendly manner before eating, but she does a complete 180 in attitude only a few seconds later.
The fried mushroom looks terribly interesting.
Yes, I'd noticed that. I'll get around to it later. Having fun in the sun, Goodnight?
Yes. I could stay here forever.
I don't get it. What is she so pissed about? Only a few minutes ago, she was begging James to save her after being kidnapped, but now all of a sudden she wants to stay with the villain? Gee, that's a real helpful assistant. What the hell is she even assisting Bond with anyway? It's not like she's a secret agent herself. The one time she does try to pitch in and help, Scaramanga just whisks her off without even trying. And the whole time, her attraction to Bond flips back and forth. One minute she doesn't want to spend the night with him, the next she's wearing a nightdress in his hotel room. She's like a spoiled little brat who constantly changes their mind and needs to have their every demand fulfilled. Even Bond can't stand the sight of her, and let me tell you, when Moore's Bond is pissed off the first time they meet, that's when you know you have a terrible Bond girl in your hands.
With the compliments.
Foo yuck.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Foo yuck.
Anyway, Bond girl aside, there is a lot to like about this film. The Southeast Asian scenery throughout the film is jaw-dropping to look at. It's a lot like You Only Live Twice in how it presented its Japanese set pieces. The neon-lit casinos of Macau, the busy streets of Hong Kong, and the dancing girls of Thailand, the whole film is a treat bag of Asian eye candy. The film is constantly aware of every culture it's immersed in and plays it up every chance it gets. Even the one scene that takes place in Beirut is also good. Bond goes to a nightclub to question a woman who witnessed the death of a 00 agent suspected to have been killed by Scaramanga. He seduces the dancer in her dressing room while attempting to steal the golden bullet lodged in her belly button before being ambushed by bouncers and starting up a brawl. In the heat of the action, Bond bumps into a dresser, and for a split second you can see the filmmakers recording the action from the mirror. Smile, you're on candid camera. Seeing Bond trying to fight his way through all the goons while avoiding choking to death on the bullet at the same time is nerve-wracking. It's a classic brawl that never gets old, especially with the cherry on top one-liner at the end.
I've lost my charm!
Not from where I'm standing.
The rest of the action scenes in general are just as great. There's not quite as many explosions in this one, probably due to the energy crisis going on at the time, but it still makes up for this by having quite a few chase sequences, as well as some good old-fashioned brawls. These duke-outs are about as intense as the action gets, save for the final scene where Bond and Goodnight escape from Scaramanga's island, which is disappointing, but at least they provide some solid entertainment. I love the part where the two schoolgirls start kicking everyone's asses. They completely steal the show. Bond doesn't even get the chance to throw a fist in, he just sort of stands back and admires their handiwork. And when it's all said and done and the girls give Bond his moment to shine, he decides it's not even worth it. I do have to say, the final duel between Bond and Scaramanga is probably one of Moore's finest moments in the whole series. It's one of the few times where having a big explosive finale wouldn't have been appropriate due to the personal nature of their showdown. The build-up in this scene is palpable. Seriously, you could cut the tension in this scene with a knife. Seeing the two navigate the funhouse, not knowing who will shoot first, is a tense experience because they're both equals in terms of skill. At times, you believe that Bond really has met his maker and that Scaramanga will come out on top. But Bond takes advantage of Scaramanga's obsession with him and manages to turn the tide in his favor. Despite all the good things I have to say, make no mistake, the man with the golden gun has flaws. Lots of them. To start, the supporting characters are unappealing to say the least. They're mostly just cheap knockoffs of already existing characters from You Only Live Twice. Tiger Tanaka is copied by Lieutenant Hip, and Mr. Osato is copied by High Fat. Yes, his name is High Fat. Ha ha ha, get it? It's a fat joke, somehow. Seriously, these characters are so lame. I mean, they're okay, I guess, but that's the problem. They're so okay, they're not even really worth talking about. They just exist as accessories to the story. Except for our good old buddy, Sheriff J.W. Pepper here, who returns from Live and Let Die.
Oh, you is ugly.
While I didn't mind his comedy in the previous film, I think Pepper outstayed his welcome in this one. Unlike in Live and Let Die, where his racism is subtly implied and not stated outright, here, they make no attempt to hide the fact that he's a racist. I felt so embarrassed for Clifton James just having to hear him say the word pointy head so many times.
I knew it! You pointy heads has no more idea of traffic control than a goonie bird!
Why is he even here in Thailand? Would you really expect a Southern cop to take a vacation to Thailand, let alone be in the same area as Bond happens to be, let alone being the exact same cop who saw Bond in the previous film? Talk about winning the lottery and being struck by lightning at the same time. It gets even worse when he tags along with Bond for an entire car chase. He just shouts and screams the whole time, like where's the humor in that? There is a pretty impressive car stunt halfway through though. Bond ends up on the wrong side of land while trying to chase after Scaramanga, and he turns around and drives off a bridge while doing a corkscrew stunt. It's still mind-blowing to watch even today, but too bad it's ruined by the slide whistle sound effect. Oh man, that's dumb. I also take issue with how some elements of the story are presented. The whole angle surrounding the Solex agitator and solar energy still doesn't make sense to me. Until recently, while planning to review these films, I never even thought about it. I always felt the whole point of the story was to kill Scaramanga. Point blank, that's it. Hearing the crew at MI6 go on about coal shortages and oil prices for what feels like eons puts me to sleep. An energy crisis is probably the least exciting premise I've ever heard for a Bond film. I understand that these things were all based on real life, at the time anyway, but the whole point of watching a Bond film is to escape real life, not to be reminded of it. I'm also not a fan of the direction they took with Roger Moore's Bond this time around. He still does have the same sense of charm and humor as he did previously, but for some reason they decided to include some aggressive tendencies to his personality this time, which really doesn't suit him. One particular scene that stands out in this regard is when Bond interrogates Anders for information about Scaramanga. He gets impatient with her and nearly breaks her arm trying to get a lead before slapping her around a couple times. I'm not necessarily against the idea of a woman in physical danger, but seeing a tonal shift from Moore's Bond here makes no sense, especially considering that writer Tom Mankiewicz was against this sort of thing.
Sean could sit at a table with a beautiful girl, and you had the option as a writer of either having him lean over and kiss her or stick a knife in her. Roger could kiss the girl, but if he stuck the knife in her, he would look nasty.
Oh, you're hurting my arm.
I'll break it unless you tell me where those bullets go.
Oh, I can't.
Try.
They'll kill me.
Who?
Ah! I can't tell you.
To sum up, The Man with the Golden Gun is an interesting experience in more ways than one. When it does things right, it's great, and it keeps you entertained for as long as the moment lasts. And when it's bad, it's just painful and makes you wish it was over. In a perfect world, this would mean that it's balanced out and an average film overall. But calling it average doesn't feel right either. If the filmmakers had focused purely on the hunt for Scaramanga and nothing else, then I could see it being a harmlessly mediocre but fun action flick to have a good time with. But instead, it gets bogged down by outdated political and environmental undertones that, in my opinion, shouldn't have any place in a Bond film. Beyond this, it seems to lack the same sense of vitality that previous films in the series did. It sort of feels like it's just going through the motions and doing the absolute minimum of being a grand Bond film, and considering the lack of energy resources at the time, and the fact that this film was produced just 1 year after Live and Let Die, it wouldn't surprise me if that were the case. It's still fun to watch in short bursts, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't have the same wow factor as before. When I first saw this film, I loved it. But I was a kid, and each time I see it as an adult now, it gets worse. It's not terrible by any means, but it's still disappointing to see the potential they could have reached be squandered right in front of us. But don't worry, the next film we're going to see is second to none, just like The Man with the Golden Gun himself. This concludes my review of The Man with the Golden Gun. Thank you for watching this review, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, stay tuned for the next part.
Good night, sleep well, my dear. No need to fear. James Bond is here.
Foo yuck.